Okay, let's get started. It's almost 2 o'clock, and thank you all for coming today, and welcome back to the community house. Even though it's not our regular time and day, at least we're here. For those of you who don't know, this was the only time that we were allowed to come in. And it's when the senior center is closed. So I'm still working on trying to get that changed, but meanwhile, this is when our meetings will be for the rest of the year until we get to December and have our Christmas party. So I hope you tell everybody that you see to please come on Fridays, because we don't have our usual number of people, but that's okay. So I have a list, which I don't have in my hand, so hold on a second. Okay. So one of the things that Carrie O'Donnell is not here today. She's head of our town gardens. I think many of you know that. She unfortunately has COVID. So she asked me to read something on her behalf about the skiffs that I think everybody knows about. We are looking for help with the holiday dinghies. Specifically, someone to take on a leadership role involving signing on a crew, working with DPW to place the skiffs, the purchase and placement of hay, mums, pumpkins, kale, squash, and the changeover to winter dinghies in November with pine trees, berries, greens, etc. We are also looking for more crew members to sign up. So if you could do that, Pam is going to pass around a clipboard. And if anyone is interested in doing it, we really need people to help with that. It's been the same people for all the years that we've had them up. And I think you can all agree they're absolutely gorgeous. I've had more people talk to me about them and how wonderful they are. So, but we do need help. The other thing we need help with, if anyone has any technical expertise and would like to do this, every time we have a meeting and we set up our sound system, I'm doing it. And I could really use somebody else that knows how to do it. So if anyone has any interest in doing that, you know, it's a 5-10 minute thing. I'd really like someone to come up and see me at the end of the meeting. Okay. Nancy's going to talk about community projects in a minute, but I have something I just wanted to say how I've seen evidence lately of how well one of the projects anyway has worked out for us. You know, we give money to a group who is doing something in the town. It's not something normal that we would do as a club. And one of them was the Flower Buds program. And I just happened to asked to have arrangements sent to 2 different people. I know they received it. I know they were appreciative. One of them was Joni Lane, who just had a really major surgery. She was our president a few years back. And I had it sent, and when I talked to her yesterday, she just went on and on and on about it and how it made her day. So if you haven't used that program, please, it's on our website, right? Somebody? Yeah, okay. You can go on the website. Anyone that you want to get a little bouquet of flowers for any reason, they're ill, they had an operation, they're just down, you can go on and ask to have one sent. And it's a lovely, lovely thing. And it's free. So, well, the club paid for it, kind of. But, yeah, it's free to you to order it. And it's not a big bouquet. It's just a simple little, lovely little thing. I also want to talk about next month, which...
So, Sherry, I went to that meeting with Leslie regarding that project. She does need help, although it's ending soon. Because there aren't any flowers soon.
Yeah.
But she does need help more
Yeah.
flower buds together, and then she could use some help. She's really doing it almost on her own.
Oh, okay. I know Pam's helped her some.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for letting us know. Okay, and I just want to say a few words about next month. Our program next month is on vernal pools. If you always wondered what that sign meant as you drive down the stretch there on Eastern Avenue, what it is, or I don't know, is that Eastern or Upper Main or whatever it is. Anyway, Rick Roth, who runs the whole Vernal Pool Association or group, is going to be here and talk about it and show us a little video and talk about all the wildlife that's in those pools. So if you're interested, or tell other people, make sure they come. The other thing we're also going to do is each committee is going to, that we have for the club, is going to be here, and we'll set up tables around this room, and they would like to inform all of our members about what they do, and hopefully find some volunteers to add to their committees, or a new person to run the committee. But it's been a while since we've been together, and you may not know what everything that the club is doing. So we thought this would be a way to introduce everyone to it. So we'll do that during the first half hour and then have the meeting afterwards. So with that, Nancy does want to talk, Nancy Duda does want to just talk for a minute about this year's community projects and hopefully get some new ones.
All right. Thank you. Well, I got to say, it is downright thrilling to be standing in this room in front of all of you today. So kudos to all of us for getting back into the community house. But I just wanted to take a minute and mention the community project grants. We're going to do another round of grants this fall. These are the $1,000 to $5,000 grants that we will give to project teams made up of Garden Club members to really extend our reach and bring to life our mission, whether that's beautification of the town, protecting the environment, community service, extending knowledge of gardening and so forth. But the applications are going to be due on October 7th. We've done a couple of announcements and a Zoom call, but I just wanted to take a minute to see if anybody had a question about that, or if they had a project in mind. So I don't see anybody really bursting forth with questions, and that's perfectly okay. Just wanted to, raise awareness, let you know the date's coming up, and if you think of something later, by all means, just grab me after the presentation. That's about all I've got.
One other announcement, one of our members, Mary Morby, I don't know how many of you know her. Her husband just passed away. So if anyone would like to send anything, you're welcome to do it if she lives right in town. But she did ask not for any food to be sent. Specifically, she asked that question. They've already received way too much, so I just wanted to let everybody know. So now we'll start our program, and Shubha is going to introduce our speakers.
Hello, trees. We called it Trees, Trees, Trees because we couldn't come up with a better title. Because we wanted to have this program be all about everything about trees. And when looking for a speaker, we noted that many of our own members had a great passion for this topic. And not only were they passionate about it, they also were doing great work to promote the benefit of value that trees bring to our lives. So hence we decided we're going to have a panel made up of our own members. And so you see Lois Muzio and Reverend Nathan Ives sitting at the table here. A couple of other members who were going to join us sent their regrets because things came up at the last minute. This is Nick Anderson and Patty Hawk. So we do have a lot of people, quite a few people that I didn't even know about that are into this topic. Now Lois doesn't need any introduction, I'm sure, because she's, she's an active member of the Garden Club, having led the library team, the library garden team for many years, and she's on the board. But what you may not know about Lois is that before coming to Rockport, before retiring in Rockport, Lois was an educator in health sciences. And so the mindset that she's bringing to this topic is that same mindset. So I think you'll enjoy her talk and her and everything that she's put together so far. I won't give anything away, Lois. Reverend Nathan Ives has been, I think, familiar to a lot of us, and we know Nate as being the driving force behind, and the founder, right, and the driving force behind Project Elms. 1,000 trees in 10 years, let's make Cape Ann green again. You know, that's a great slogan, by the way. So both Lois and Nate will each talk about their work, their learning, and challenges that they see or they faced, experiences and so on. And then we're going to open it up for question answer. And when I say we're going to open it up for question answer, I don't mean that you'll ask the questions and they'll have the answers. I'm hoping for a lively discussion that everybody will jump in with their own experiences. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of you. Who wants to go first?
I'm here today to talk to you about this. This. Okay. Maybe I don't have it on. It's on? You can hear me? Yep. I can't hear myself. This is a walking guide for people who are interested in trees in town. It was something that I thought of a while back, a little bit to you. This is the first of 3 that we're planning to do. It's a tour that includes the headlands and 18 or so trees in that area that we have selected as being of particular interest and of being examples of situations that are supportive to the environment and other situations that might not be so supportive to the environment. I was not alone in preparing this. I had the idea to do it, and I was joined at first by Shubra, who then took over all of the work related to putting it into a form, pulling the pictures together into a form that could be printed, could be published, and also of Lisa Sims, who put together this map of the tour for people to follow. Each tree is identified on it. Another person that was involved was Nick, Liz Fergola's husband, who took almost all of the pictures that are in here of the trees. So, but I want to go back on this and to talk about how I got started at it. I read a book. It was given to me. It was a birthday gift in 2017, and when I read it, I don't know if do any of you know of this book? It's called The Hidden Life of Trees. Yes, this is what started it all, by Peter Walben. I was astounded when I read as I was reading the book, because there was so much in this book that I had never known about trees and their involvement in the environment and what they, how important they are to live of people, of animals, of insects, of birds, and how they interact, how they support each other. I was amazed, and then I was angry because I thought, my goodness, I'm a college graduate. I didn't know these things. I was a biology major. I didn't know these things. So I think perhaps there's some need for our schools to incorporate more about the importance of trees to our lives and our futures in this country and in the world. So as a result of that, I started becoming more aware of the roles they play. I had always appreciated the beauty of trees, and I was familiar with the products of dead trees: lumber, paper products, furniture, wooden pellets for our fireplaces, packaging, Kleenex, toothpicks, all kinds of things are made of wood. As a matter of fact, I began, wherever I was looking, I was seeing some product of wood. But my attention turned more to living trees and what they offer to the environment and its inhabitants, the food it offers, the shelter for ourselves that we use, and for animals, birds, medicines, how they contribute to the quality of the soil, how they resist erosion, which then contributes to the quality of water in our streams and our rivers. They're the primary factor that resists global warming because they remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They sequester it in their structures, and they return free oxygen to the atmosphere. I recently read that at a time prior to humans on the earth, there were trees. There were trees and giant ferns that did exactly what I mentioned. At that time, the oxygen levels were 35%. Now, oxygen levels are 20%. So you can kind of infer that there has been a decline in the amount of oxygen in the air, and it's only the trees that return the oxygen to the air that has been used. And prior to this, reading this book, I had no idea that trees, with the aid of fungi in the soil, could communicate with each other, could share resources, and become what is called a superorganism. In the future, I think I will avoid planting a single tree. I think I will plant a group of trees, or plant trees near other trees, if this is so important to the health and welfare of trees. I realized I was probably not the only one lacking in knowledge about trees, and I thought others might also be interested in learning more. And that was when the idea of a walking tour for the trees in Rockport. There are some beautiful trees in Rockport, and I think that they can be appreciated even more than they are now. I thought it would be possible to incorporate information about the roles of trees in preventing erosion in the booklet, providing food and shelter for birds and other animals. I also wanted to include information about the threats to native trees from imported pathogens and invasive species, and from people, but in an interesting and informative way. To begin, Schuber and I took a walk in the area that we had selected for the tour. We chose the trees we thought would be of interest. A few of the trees had been recommended by members of the garden club already. I started reading because I am no expert on trees, but for this project, I had to do research. And I started making notes about the trees we had selected. I was looking for human interest stories, things that would capture people's imagination. One example is of a hunter and his son who survived a winter in a hollow trunk of a Virginia sycamore. There's a sycamore on this tour. Such stories can provide meaning for such facts that sycamores add to their girth at a greater rate than other trees, and as a result, they tend to be more hollow than other trees. It also explains why the bark looks older, why the bark has older and darker portions that look like they have been pulled apart to make room for new growth. Right on the surface, you can see how fast that tree is growing. If you take this walk, I'm sure you will also notice how many of the trees in this residential neighborhood are not native. There seems to be a general preference for the exotic. Perhaps that will change as we learn more about the importance of native species, but we will never reestablish the primeval forest with its ancient trees that stood here when the British explorers came and looked at the stately white pines that grew almost to the water's edge, but they saw masts for their ships. Such historical connections are also useful for creating interest in the walk. I am now looking for a white pine tree because I want to include information in the next guide that we do about how these trees were taken by the British to provide masts for their ships. Tall, straight trees had become rare in Britain at the time. Massachusetts and New Hampshire shorelines had many white pines. Suitable trees were marked by the British with an arrow that claimed them for the Royal Navy. A pre-Tea Party riot called the Mast Tree Riot occurred when colonists were punished. They were caned for cutting and hiding pine logs. After the Revolution, the pines were still taken, but this time by the U.S. Navy. So I hope you will enjoy this walk, the trees, and their stories. And if you have any comments or suggestions for the next issue, I would appreciate them. Thank you very much.
Great job, thank you. So good afternoon, it's good to be with you. My colleague read a book, and I just grew up on Norwood Ave. And when you grow up on Norwood Ave in the 1960s, you come out of your house, and you come down the granite steps, and you're immediately struck by the shade that is just ever present up and down the street. Shade from elm trees that were 70, 60, 100 feet tall that graced both sides of the street and other streets like Pleasant Street, where I go to see my best friend Paul Murphy, or downtown, go down Mount Pleasant Street, or down along Main Street. Wherever you went, there were elm trees. Elm trees graced above the donkey yard, which was on Norwood Avenue on the right-hand side where Lolly and Bob Gray live now. And there were two donkeys that were kept there by Kendrick Strong that would be covered all day in shade by these gracious elms. And then I remember about the age of 8 or 9 when the town crews would come through and take these trees down because they had died from Dutch elm's disease. Now, Dutch elm's disease had been in the United States since the 1930s, and it gradually took millions of trees all over the eastern seaboard and in the interior of the country. And sadly, the reaction was to cut, because in many cases they realized now that they didn't need to have cut all of the trees, but they did cut them. And there was plentiful supply of firewood for a long time from all those trees. And it occurred to me as I got older and moved back to Rockport, and even before I moved back to town, that of course we were barren of those trees. I mean, the look of Rockport today is so different than what it was when I was a kid. And if you walk up Norwood Avenue, for instance, or Pleasant Street, or any of these streets that were so graced by these trees, you can still see the dimples in the roadway today where those elms stood. And they're not little dimples. They would be beyond Lois and me, sitting there right in front of Kelly's house, up near Delaney's and on downward. You'll see it on both sides of the road. Those are elm dimples. That's where they once stood. But it occurred to me that there was now a resurgence of investment and research done in elm trees, that there were some cultivars that were going to survive Dutch elm's disease to a degree, and some to a significant degree. And wouldn't it be interesting if we could get some of those in the ground? And so I mulled it around and thought, well, let's just try it and see if we can't get a couple of trees planted. And I happened to luck upon a gentleman who lives in town just across the street on Broadway Terrace, Sal Zerilli. And Sal, I'd seen online about the awesome Rockport grants for $1,000. And I thought, well, that might be seed money to buy some trees and see if we might get some folks to put them in the ground. And having had some experience in working with the municipality, I knew it wasn't going to be taking place that way very easily. So we decided to work with homeowners. And I submitted a grant, and the grant came back as a positive. They really loved the idea and gave us $1,000 to get it started. So then the hunt was on for what kind of trees we could find the best cultivars. My research indicated that Valley Forge elm cultivar was the best, but they were not readily available. After a lot of searching, I learned what I didn't realize is common knowledge amongst tree people, but all elm trees are cultivated in Oregon for the United States. And once a year, they place orders or take orders up to a certain date, and then they pull those trees and ship them across the country to the nurseries that buy them, or to crazy young people that want to plant them, and get them in the ground all over town. And so we made an arrangement with a nursery that was in Weston, Mass, and it was after calls all over the country that led me to this information about Oregon and about Western Mass, and finally we settled on a place that would provide us our trees, and we were able to get about 25, 30 trees for the $1,000. And that's not a lot of trees, but the aim was to see if we couldn't entice people to plant them on the edge of their property, facing the sidewalks and the streets, so that we could recreate that effect that used to be here of elm trees up and down the cityscape. And that's where we stood until such time as Awesome Rockport came back to us and said, we want you to have $5,000, not just one. And Awesome Gloucester had contributed as well. So between the two organizations, we were able to have $5,000. Now we could go and work on 100 trees and try and get them in the ground. And you couldn't do any of this without some incredible folks to help dig the holes and get them in the earth. And so some really remarkable people, many of whom are probably one of the only ones not on Medicare, were willing to get their shovels in the ground and help me out. And man, did we ever. So the theme of our project, or the kind of concept of it, has been organized around 1 or 2 weeks in April. Because the trees, you order the trees in February, and then they come in April on a date that they give you about 2 days' notice, and they're just coming. And so we knew we had to get the word out. So we got the word out, got 100 places to commit the first trees in Rockport and Gloucester. And then we assembled this crew of about 15 people. And we just started to dig them in. And so we got them in, and it was funny. One of the problems that we encountered was that our idea of the cityscape nearest to the sidewalk was not the idea of the homeowner necessarily. Either because they don't have a sidewalk, you know, they're an interior thing and there's no such thing nearby, or they had a really lovely spot in mind that was way in their back 40, and no one from the street would see it. So you had to work with, or there were power lines up front, or some kind of impediment to doing it where we hoped they would do it. But by and large, folks were willing to consider putting it in a place that was really suitable to creating what I'd call the elm effect in Rockport and Gloucester. And we got them in. So 100 trees went in the ground. And then last year, we did 75 more. And thanks to all of you, we were able to purchase those trees and get them in the ground all over. And that included Rockport, Gloucester, Manchester, and Essex. And so it's truly a Cape Ann, pan-Cape Ann challenge to get these trees in the ground. And it's been a lot of fun. The same crew plus more folks were willing to help us get them in the ground. And we pair off in 2s and 3s. The elms come as whips, and a whip is like 6 to 7 feet tall. It's thinner than this microphone, usually about this thickness down here. And one might wonder why we'd go with such a thin tree, and that's because there's longevity. If you plant them thicker, older, they're going to die. They're more susceptible to dying because they just don't hold up. So they really want to be young trees to go in the ground. So these are only like 3-year-old trees. So the plan continues to do 1,000 trees in 10 years all over Cape Ann. So we have a website, Cape Ann Elms. Project Elm is a part of it. And so folks can sign up for a tree. We will probably not have sufficient funds to give them away, which we've done in the past, is give them away so folks could help us pay. They're about $56 a tree. And we do different cultivars, so we're diversifying amongst the varieties that are available. So if you have something that affects Princeton elms, you can, you know, the ones that are Harmony elms or Valley Forge elms will hopefully stand up where the others didn't. But we're afoot with another project as well. And that is to work with the town of Rockport and to see if we might create in basically the area from Knowlton's Corner, or the corner of Beach Street and Granite Street, at the far end of Back Beach, all the way up to Marmion Way, and inland to this point around here, so 5 Corners up to Parker Street and towards the water. Could we, where elms once stood, replant them where the cityscape allows for it? Because there's infrastructure now where there never was one. Now, the reason elms thrived in Rockport, so there were no sidewalks and there was no pavement on the streets. So, where there were sidewalks, they were dirt sidewalks with just the granite curbstone. So there was dirt above the curbstone, or to the left of it, if you will, towards the houses, and then the streets themselves were dirt. And so getting water and nutrients was easy for an elm in that scape. Now that is not the case. And in fact, where elms once stood are sewers and electrical lines in some cases, if you're down at Old Garden or in different certain neighborhoods or along Main Street in some places, as well as water lines. Any number of utilities are in the ground. So the concept is, can we have an analysis done? Can we get a grant to do a study with, say, a landscape architect and or an arborist to look at the cityscape from those 2 points, from basically Knowlton's Corner up to the Marmion Way area, and find out where, among those areas, where did elms once stand? That information we have available to us from the Sandy Bay Historical Society, because we have photographic evidence of where the elms were by and large. And you can still go down and see evidence, as I mentioned. So we'll know where one overlay is where they once stood. Another overlay is where they cannot go because there's infrastructure now. But some of you may want to, let's say you own a home in one of these areas, and your home is parallel to the road and your roof line is parallel to the road, and you might someday want to have solar panels on your roof. You don't want an elm in front of your house if you're going to do that. So those houses would have to be skipped because it may not be you that owns it now and wants to put a solar panel on, but maybe your grandchildren or the next owner or 2 owners down the road. But what about a house that's perpendicular? Their roof line is perpendicular to the road, and a solar panel system would not be feasible there. that might be a site. So those kind of sites where there's no infrastructure, there's no interference with future solar panels or something like that, and where there's homeowner interest and where the town says it's okay, might we plant elms there? And how many might that be? So we don't know the answer to those questions yet because we haven't done the study. But we're preparing, we have support of the Rockport Beautification Committee, and we have support of the DPW commissioners to embark on a study to just see what we can find out. And then, once the information's in, see what it would cost to do it. And the Community Preservation Fund has indicated that they're very interested in helping us get the job done when it comes to either doing the study or eventually getting them in the ground. I think they were anxious initially to put in wicked big trees, you know, so you'd have an immediate bang for your buck, but we know that's not good for longevity of these trees. They'll die off if you plant them too big. So there's the concept of putting in a small tree like a whip in a place. Surprisingly, they don't need this enormous piece of property to do this. It can't be a postage stamp, but it doesn't need to be a swimming pool either size. But they do need a place where they can get some enrichment and water. And it's a great place for a rain garden in the meantime while these trees grow to plant stuff that'll keep down. So there's all kinds of opportunities to perhaps collaborate with the Rockport Garden Club or others, beautification committee and such, to help with the cityscape while we're waiting for the trees to really thrive. So that's what we're up to. It's a completely volunteer effort. The only overhead we have is our annual maintenance fees for the website and the cost of the trees. We just get them in the ground, and this team of folks that helps us are amazing, truly dedicated, very funny, and hardworking. So it's a lot of fun. I hope you'll join us someday. Thank you.
Out of it, and it's breaking my heart. Nathan and my husband planted 2 trees on my neighbor's property, which is a rental. There's not always people in there, and if there are, people don't care if it's watered. I see the leaves going down.
Yeah.
So I went to one board meeting that I was invited to, and Pam mentioned that you can buy gallons of water.
Yes.
And there is a place, if it's still in existence, there's a place over in Gloucester that you can take the empty container and get the container filled with water for 35 cents. Yes. 35 cents, you can fill it up. So I'm taking these 2 gallons of water, I'm walking over to my neighbor's property, and I'm pouring it on the roofs. And the next day, the leaves are out. Wow. But it breaks my heart, and I don't need the mic.
You don't need the mic.
It breaks my heart that they planted it. The town wanted them to plant it. This is something longevity for 20 years, if not longer. We're letting them die so we can have a tomato in our salad. I don't get it. So, you know, apparently the garden club has approached DPW or whoever's in charge of the water restriction, and it's still a no. You can water your garden, but you can't water. But I walk in daylight with these 2 gallons of water, and I pour them on each tree.
Laura, you want to use the mic? Laura?
You know, that was, I wrote it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I do think that there are ways that we can often water our trees, and I did have a question related to this. One thing, the DPW does have that truck, and with a request, they have a big tank, and I don't know, I think they've been watering the town trees that the Institution for Savings planted, which includes 5 elms. But I wondered how you managed, do you like have a contract with the people who take the elms that they're supposed to water them at least twice a week for 4 years or something?
Yeah, the general ask of every person that takes an elm is the commitment to water it with a bucket of water when we don't have an inch of rain that week. And so that's the mantra. And so now I have one of these elms on my property, and I planted one last year, and it's doing fantastically. It's just done great. Its caliper has grown quite a bit. It's a big tree, and in just a year. So that doesn't need any support. I was giving it a drink while we could up to now, and so then of course then when the drought really hit, you couldn't do that, but it's held its ground. It's doing okay. But if folks had done that up to now, then they're not in that bad a shape. But buckets are the thing to do. Don't use your garden hose because that's forbidden, but you can grab a bucket and take it out there and just dump a bucket of water on there once a week or something. You could.
I live in an old house, and so I don't have any drainage in my basement, and I have a very smelly basement. And I get that much water out of my dehumidifier every day, and I pull it up. And the other thing I've started to do is I got a big bucket, and I put it underneath the faucet when the water's warming up for my shower. I have been shocked by how much water I waste. It's amazing. And then when I wash the vegetables, I have a big bowl underneath that. And I've been able to use that, and it's gallons.
It's gallons. Yeah.
It's gallons, and you can get probably 4 or 5 gallons of water a day just out of your wastewater without even going with the stuff that has soap in it.
But even that soap, I know that we looked into it, and soap is not, the amount of soap that will end up in the bath water is not going to be harmful for anything. So if, Lisa Sims, she's actually plugging a bathtub, and then she has a pump that she uses to pump it out. But she's extreme. Okay, so Nathan, there's a question for Nathan. When are you planting more elm trees in Rockport? I think you sort of answered that.
So the site is open now. It's taking orders for the spring. We'll do an announcement on Facebook shortly to kind of get the vibe going again. And then folks will have until the latter part of January to place their orders. And then we'll get the trees ordered in February, get them delivered in April. And Don Southard and I, and amongst others, are going to go out there and dig again. And so we'll keep on going. That's always the underlying goal. Again, you can't always get that. So given climate change and the need for trees no matter what, as you say, and the fostering of good relations amongst other trees, it's fine to just get them in the ground in a healthy spot. But you want to give them plenty of room. These are going to be big trees. So
the next question is actually a different one, not about elms. How should I protect my newly planted Japanese maple? It's now 5 feet tall from winter in Rockport. Does anybody have an answer to that question? Well, I can tell you that I don't have a Japanese maple, but my daughter does, and she lives in Boston, which maybe a few degrees different from here, but not that much. The Japanese maple has done fine, and she doesn't do anything to it. It's beautiful. It looks gorgeous, and there's several in her entire neighborhood, actually, and they seem to be doing fine.
I was just going to say, I have a Japanese maple, and the winters here have never bothered it at all, but it is bothered by this summer.
You can wrap it sometimes with tape and to keep it warm and secure, but you run the risk of bugs when you do that. And I've tried it both ways, and it just seems to be fine without it.
So the Japanese maple is fine without wrapping and protection. All right. So the other question we have is, should we be planting only native trees, and why? And why would you consider, what would you consider native to our area?
Well, native to our area includes a wide spread of trees, of, you know, oaks and elms and maples of all stripes. Gosh, what are the ones that you've, some of the species, can you rattle off from your tour? Is there, I mean, sycamore, linden, right?
Yes, sycamore. Well, there are several types of linden trees. Some of them are European, so you would have to know which was which. But there is an American linden. There. Yes. Redbud. Yes. Serviceberry. Birch. Yes, birch. Again, the birch. It depends on which birch you're talking about. So. White pine, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes.
Beech trees.
Yes, she does have a list, but the question was, should we be only focusing on native trees? And I know there is a variety of them, or, you know, if you look at the tree tour that we're doing, quite a few of them are not natives, including our apple tree. You know, the apple tree is not a native; it's from Europe, or we were trying to figure out where it's from, actually, Asia. Okay. Originally, yeah, it was brought
Certainly
here.
would be the goal, I would think. You mentioned beech trees. Beech trees, if you go into Dogtown, that's pretty much the predominant tree in much of Dogtown, or at least the Rockport end of Dogtown. And there is a beech tree, I'm not sure how they're labeling it, but there's a disease amongst beech trees that has traveled in a short span of time, like under 2 years, from Ohio to here, and it's a die-off, a tremendously high die-off rate. And the Dogtown's got it already in 2 years. So Eric Hutchinson was reporting this at a DPW commissioners meeting. So Eric would be a good source because he lives right there at the edge of Dogtown. But beech trees, and where at a place in my place in Maine, beech trees everywhere, and I'm afraid they'll be hit by this too. It's rapidly gone across the United States.
Do you know where it came from?
I don't know, but I thought I had heard from Eric the origination was, well, at least in the States, was around the middle part of the country, Ohio area. And in under 2 years, it had traveled the East Coast.
Any questions? Go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, I have, on our property, we have two elm trees that seem to not have succumbed yet to the Dutch elm disease. Do we just let them go?
Yeah, that's so funny you say that. So we did this project, and I saw this volunteer in my garden, and I was like, what is this? You know, I don't understand. It didn't look like a perennial that I had planted. I kept an eye on it, and I said, okay, it's a tree. And oftentimes, those volunteers are black walnut trees that we had, and they come up pervasively all over the place. And I said, this is different. It was an elm. And an elm had just, so the seeds are still out there. And then I started to realize that there are elms on Clark Avenue. And now they're not enormous trees, and they look like they're stressed. And come to find out, elms are still in circulation, but they generally don't live, by and large, over the 20-year mark. And so they don't get to the towering way that they once did. But that they can survive up to a point, and then the disease gets them. However, I learned from Lois that when you come down Prospect Street and you approach the intersection of South Street where it begins, and the end of Mount Pleasant Street, where Bennett Carlson used to live, or Cynthia Peckham, right there in the corner, 45 Mount Pleasant Street, there is a very large elm that is thriving. It's one of the best specimens in Rockport that I know of right now. So take a ride or walk and just check it out. It's really cool. So there are some. On my street now, I've noticed there's at least 3 or 4, not as big as that one by any stretch. So keep them going. They may die in 20 years, but that's good. Then I think they're faring pretty well.
There are 2 large elms in Millbrook Meadow over by King Street between Frog Pond and King Street.
Just wondered where we can get the book, Lois, that you...
Oh, I was going to announce it before you leave. Just pick up a copy before you leave. Maura.
Politically incorrect and very tongue-in-cheek. There is a man in Georgia who is a former football player. His name is Herschel Walker, and he is running for the senator of Georgia. And his famous statement is, "I don't know why people talk about trees. We have plenty of them. What we need is more policemen." Okay? So could we please send that book to Herschel? I don't know. I think we should. What are trees saying, you know?
Postage too.
Are here, and there's one for everybody.
One thing I meant to mention that we're going to Laura's point from some months ago, our effort when we do it in the center of town would be to diversify and to incorporate beautiful other trees as well, so that we're really spreading the wealth around. Silver maples, if you have not frequently gone down Clark Ave as it turns from Norwood, that's all silver maples down the line. They do beautifully in Rockport. And where Carol Delaney's house is, right opposite, right on Norwood Ave at the top of the hill at Star Island Lane, is one of the largest silver maples I've ever seen. And it's an 1860s, I think, example of a tree in Rockport. They have a picture that way back when and it still stands there. And if you haven't gotten into the Kieran Preserve, which parallels or is between Straysmith Way and Marmion Way, right near where Christine lives, that's amazing trees in there. And it's worth a walk. You want to watch your footing because there is some rockiness in there, but it's a nice path that the Rights of Way maintains, and amazing, amazing trees, huge trees.
Other questions?
So, I noticed when in the schools there's a bunch of new young trees. Are those are yours?
Yep.
Okay. And then a question for Lois. The book, Hidden Life of Trees. You might be able to answer this question. I knew they do a lot of work to communicate with each other. My mother-in-law here wanted to know if trees sleep.
In the winter.
I don't have a question, just a quick comment, and it's for Lois. I'll just give her. Lois, quick. It's not a question, it's a comment. I was having a nice conversation with Nancy Robb, and she said she has a wonderful old white oak, and you might consider that for one of your future tours. Phillips and Mount Locust.
Where?
Over in Pigeon Cove.
In Pigeon Cove, yeah, okay. Other.
Yes, 170-year-old tree.
Just turn on.
Can you send me an email with that information?
Yeah, I did notify people during the winter when
Thank you. Anyone who wants to suggest a tree to me.
I mean, this tree is gorgeous. I mean, it's like, the trunks like this.
I would be very appreciative.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, this is just a comment related to the book you read, Lois. And if anyone here has read The Overstory by Richard Powers, and that was my introduction to the concept of trees communicating with one another. And around the holidays, we had planted a stand of white pines, thinking I would like to just have a little bit of sort of privacy from the yard next door. These have shot up to, I don't know, 25 or 30 feet. They've kind of come sort of as a band together. And I went out to just snip some greens for floral arrangements, the holidays. And after reading that book, I clipped a couple, and I started to feel extremely uncomfortable, And I thought, they probably don't need this. It's not pruning that they need. Maybe I should back off. So I had very skimpy little holiday arrangements as a result. But it's a fascinating notion.
A couple comments and a question for Nathan, but comments, what you were just saying, Jean, about feeling bad about clipping the tree. We brought in some leaves for today for decoration, and as I was taking them off, I'm going, I'm sorry. I tried to find some on the ground, but they were dead. So, but also when we were talking about native trees, I have an eastern redbud that I believe is considered native, and I'll tell you, it is beautiful. I bought it as a small tree, and I just love it. It turns different colors throughout the whole year, and in the spring, kind of late spring, it's a late bloomer, it gets most gorgeous flowers right on the wood. The leaves don't come out, it gets it right on the wood. After the flowers are gone, then the leaves come out. And then they go through different colors throughout this whole season. But question for Nathan, on an elm, when you plant it, do you have to be aware of what's under the ground too, if there's pipes, and sewer pipes and water and all?
Yeah, you sure do, because any tree is going to look for water any way they can find it, especially on a year like this. And so, and they are very adept at getting into things that they shouldn't probably get into. But they don't have regrets like anybody else here. So anyhow, yeah, you don't want to do it. You wouldn't want to do it over your leach field or something, you know, where it's going to tap into water like that. So you want to be careful about certainly where your water mains come and go, or your sewer pipes and that. Because so at my church in Salem, they're not elm trees, but the trees. So the guy came because we had some plumbing troubles, and it was just the tree roots have gotten in there, and it was incredible what they did. This was a sewer main it's brick and all this from the 1800s, and they've gone in and taken it over. So.
You all have been so supportive of Millbrook Meadow, and we've focused on the flowers and things that we've planted, but we've also given quite a bit of attention to the trees that we've planted. Besides the 3 weeping meadows in the flat part of the meadow, a cutting from the old 1912 weeping willow was planted on the hill across the brook, and that was 2 years ago, and it's 20 feet tall. We've also planted 2 white oaks, 2 silver maples, 2 red maples, and 2 honey locust, a shagbark hickory, and then the town, we got one of the maples from the town. And of the 5 elm from the town, you probably know 2 are behind the library, 1 by the town hall annex, and 1 in front of town hall, that are all doing beautifully. They're quite substantial trees. So I just thought you might like to know that's another part of that project.
And it was so sad to see an enormous tree, I guess it must have been a maple, taken down behind the library, and they put an elm right next to it. So they've done, I actually think it's higher than 5 up and down Broadway and around. This was across from the Broadway mill houses, right across the street, the entrance parking lot for the library. They took down this tree 2 years ago, and put an elm there, and it's doing great.
So that tree was a widowmaker. You know, it was going to come down any minute, so we were harassing them to take it down.
Are chestnut trees native to?
Yeah, chestnut trees are certainly native, and they were in the millions and millions in the United States. A devastating blight has taken those, and pardon me a sec. They have not yet solved the blight for the chestnut trees yet. They're trying to. There's a Chestnut Tree Foundation that is working towards it. You can plant them now, and they encourage people to plant them knowing that they will die, but you help fund the research to keep it going. You'll have it for a little while, so hopefully that will come back. Many of your old houses in Rockport, many of your barns and all that, they're all chestnut beams. That was, in the fire service, we used chestnut blocks because they're wicked light but wicked sturdy and will support. So in a car accident, we'll make crisscross, what's called dunnage, to support a car, and it's chestnut wood that we would always like to use because it's so light to handle and you can lug it places easily, but it'll hold up.
I was wondering if you have considered a fringe tree, because I don't live in town, but I love this club here. You do such magnificent work. I have a property with 25 different trees, and when the fringe tree blooms at the end of May, I invite my friends, and I belong to the North Shore Horticultural Society, and those members come. It's a magnificent tree that has white tassels on every branch, you know it, and it's spectacular. But I don't know how hardy it is.
Japan or China, if I remember.
I've not heard of it.
It's a beautiful tree.
Huh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
But I don't think it's native by any chance. I don't think so. Yeah. Other questions? Nancy.
Do you know who it is that asked the question about, gee, should I plant native, or why does it matter? Or
I didn't put the name.
Oh, okay. And I don't know if that person is here, but it's really, why do we plant native trees, right? And it's to support the local animals and insects in the local food web. And I think that this club has had a number of speakers on that topic, and also Lisa Sims does a good job of archiving all of those presentations on the website. So if anybody has questions about that, why we plant natives and why people keep talking about it, take a look at some of those presentations and you know, get that answer. Because sometimes people just sort of stop at, well, you should plant native trees, and then somebody else might come back and say, well, you know, I don't like the native trees. I have another tree that I'd like to plant, and why can't I plant that, and why is that a problem? It's not about an argument. It's the underlying information that might be helpful.
It's a good topic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Apple tree is not native, so, but it supports bees. It does a wonderful job of providing food. I don't know. I mean, it's just a question.
Yeah, and everybody needs to answer that for themselves. But I think this club has done a good job of at least educating and providing more information about that.
If you haven't had a chance and you have an hour or so, go online and look at Salem's tree site. So the city of Salem contacted me because they heard about Project Alma and they wanted to do something similar in Salem. In fact, I'm going to do a talk there next week or the week after. And they pointed me to their site, and it is unbelievable what they've done with trees. What Don Southard was trying to do in Rockport a number of years ago and ran into headwinds was to have a policy in Rockport that if you are the owner of a property with an enormous tree on it, you have an obligation to keep that tree going. And that if that tree should come down, you should replace it with a similar tree so that you have that effect continuing. And in other words, sure, you might have to take this tree down here, but maybe plant one over here that'll end up as big. And given the state of the world today, we need that kind of action so we can really protect the climate and help solve this crisis we're in. So Salem's, I was amazed at what they did. And they've accomplished a lot and have an incredible, they have a lot of tools on there that are just remarkable. It is well worth your time to check it out.
I just looked it up because I thought fringe trees were native, and because I had seen some, and there is a Chinese fringe tree and there's an American fringe tree. And they have some, if you ever get to Chicago, go to the prairie gardens that they have near the Bean, and they have some fringe trees there, and I saw them, I guess it must have been right about Memorial Day. They were absolutely jaw-dropping stunning. They're just gorgeous when they're in bloom. So, but anyway, if anybody's looking for native plants, although they have some non-natives in there, but they have beautiful ones there. And apparently there are fringe trees in this country.
I believe Corliss Nursery has a separate list of native trees. It's probably not hugely extensive. It's probably the most popular ones, but they do keep a separate list, which can be helpful.
The rest drive all the way to Framingham, Russell's has a huge native plant section. They have trees, shrubs. Do any of you know Russell's? I know, Pam, you know Russell's. They have a huge, they're expanding that by the day. It's like a huge, and of course there's Native Plant Trust, which also has a nursery in Framingham, so.
And Bigelow Nursery is the one that we're using in the middle part of the state.
Which one?
Bigelow Nursery.
Bigelow.
Very large selection and really good. And did deliver out here.
Other questions, comments? Okay, so then we're going to close the meeting. Please take your booklet. I also wanted to say, if you don't want to carry a paper booklet, if you go onto our website, right on the first, the menu, you look down, there is a line item called Tree Tour. And you go into the tree tour and you'll see this guide, but it's not in a booklet format. It's in a format you can actually read on your phone. And there is also an interactive map online that if you click on each of, if you start with the one location, and if you click on the location, and it'll take you to the next location, that it'll give you directions. Like Google Map. It's a Google Map thing that we did. So you don't have to carry the booklet around. But we will have copies available at the information booths, different information booths, so that people can pick it up as well.